Good afternoon. It's me, Jay. I'm back with more about Spook. I wanted to go live on October 31st because I said, as you're going to see in my introduction in the comment, that it's Halloween. There is no better time to spook than a spooky day, right? So, Spook science tackles the afterlife. I hope you do recall some of our one-sided conversation. We left our live talk last time talking about a guy named Dave Easter who developed a TEC, the Thomas Edison communicator, based on the psychophone idea. Well, in 1980s, another guy called William O'Neill, together with another guy named George Meek, developed Spiricon, a device for spirit communication, and published a whole load of spirit communications of a very mundane nature, not that very interesting as far as Mary Roach wanna know and see. They went public with their records, those people claiming that they have electronic proof that the mind, memory, banks, and personality survive death. For some reason, this was perplexing to the author, and when she asked, she got the previously mentioned answer from experts that it was an unconscious delusion. That's the answer she got when she asked. Then, whose unconscious delusion was meant? The author of Spook? The authors of Spiricon transcriptions, or the audiences? The author also included a story about Staffordshire's Westwood, an old building in England that was known for being haunted. As the caretaker was writing a paper on Lady Prudentia Trentham, the spell checker highlighted Prudentia with double A at the end. Prudentia, and suggested the words dead, buried, cellar instead of correcting the spelling, just deleting the A. It suggested those things: dead, buried, cellar. The guy and his wife contacted the Society for Psychical Research, since the same thing happened with other computers they looked up in the school. Engineers who examined the devices ruled the incidents as simple hacking event or some other electronic glitches. Now I'm sure this happens to lots of you when you're using the computers or handling any kind of computer software on the internet, because of what has been stored in the computer or in the engine searches, that because they preserve certain memory of the research topics within the parameters of the researchers, the neighborhood network, and even distant ones, and all what is related to what a person is searching. I also was filled with awe when I first encountered similar issues decades ago, a long time ago, as I started using the computer. I just felt it was freaky, like, you put something in the computer you want to, and that was in the absence of any internet or anything. I am trying to search something or just trying to write some words, and then I get lots of words. The spell checker also gave me many words that were unrelated, or I thought unrelated, and I thought it was funny. Here, my computer is sentient, it's thinking. And later, I started attributing those things to hackers or to memory that's preserved in the computer, in the research engines. The caretaker and his wife were not convinced with the offered explanation, especially that some of Woodward's the spell checker offered as corrections for the same name Prudentia were Pennyho. Pennyho in the story of the lady who died there was the lady's Prudentia's helper. Engineers also found an explanation, common sense. Many research papers were either authored by Pennyho, cited or mentioned by a person named, or cited a name of Pennyho who also had authored some paper, or just a person who wrote something about something else, but they have a name Pennyho, and the computer preserves all that in its memory. The author cautioned both skeptics, like myself, or people who are in denial possibly, and believers not to rush into formulating opinions, but dismiss the spirit photography, or spirit orbs, as she referred to them, and forwarded the explanation that they might be water droplets or specks of dust on the camera lens. You see, in those big houses that have been deserted or abandoned for a long time, and then you go back and start cleaning, and there's lots of dust. And even when you clean it thoroughly and you're taking pictures, the dust might fall on the camera, or just an aura of dust might be caught on the camera, and then you can explain it according to what your mind interpreted. Hence the idea that the old buildings are haunted, as those spirit orbs show on pictures. They are full of dust, especially if being renovated. Pictures are bound to capture the aura of invisible dust. The link between electromagnetic fields and spirit is explained as the result of our brain's distorted perception caused by the presence of an electromagnetic field. This is what she discusses in chapter 9. In this chapter, inside the magnetic box, can electromagnetic fields make your brain hallucinate? That's the question of the chapter, and that's the focus. The Consciousness Research Lab at Laurentian University, To Be Electronically Haunted, is a program they were running by Michael Prisinger, a neuroscience professor. The belief that Earth's natural electromagnetic fields and man-made ones, such as appliances, computers, any electronic devices, can make the human brain susceptible to hallucinations. Example, sensed invisible presences. He made a correlation between 37 reported haunting cases and that coincided with geomagnetic activity. A couple reported to him having felt touches, seen shadows, and been breathed on in their bedroom by invisible presence. When the researcher and his wife, the researcher and his team went to verify the issue, they noticed the house was loaded with electromagnetic devices that were poorly grounded, electromagnetic devices and poorly grounded wiring. Magnetic fields Yes, magnetic fields were detected making the house. Thus, strong magnetic field, or just she said magnetic fields were detected, making the house thus a real theater for hunting-like activity, activity that might seem to the one subjected with those changes or affected with those changes that the electromagnetic fields that do, they can feel those as haunting or specters or anything like that. But the outcome of the results of the interaction between the brain circuitry and the EMF, that's the result of those things. I myself have experienced in the house. I've been living here for quite a while. I've experienced certain things like that, like feeling like as if I were breathed on, or catching with my peripheral vision some shadows. But it's possible because we have so many electronic devices, and the walls are not really, the wiring is not really that well grounded in the house. And we also hear kind of noises. The heating makes some noises, and as I shared with you before, I sometimes in the microwave messages that have nothing to do with cooking or minutes and what's left with the message, like totally different. I even took pictures and posted them on YouTube, on Facebook. As for what she called the orbs, photography, I had so many things that I caught on camera that were intriguing to me. I don't say they are paranormal activities, but possibly like, catching some aura of dust, or, mind being affected by all the electromagnetic fields that are around, and they could be also targeted. It could be a targeted activity to induce that type of thinking and perception. This was modern science explanation, neuroscience explanation. Now, Mary Roach wanted to be the test of subjects for this theory, and asked the professor to expose her to laboratory-generated EMFs. They can generate that in a lab, and she asked to be the subject just to see if what has been reported is true. Whether she would see specters or hallucinate or feel like as if she's seeing something. But then she was asked to go in to fill a questionnaire. The questionnaire, she kind of joked about it. It was funny. The type of question were not. They had her ask, not really doubt those the validity of these questions. Why am I being asked those questions on the questionnaire before getting into an experiment? Do you mow the lawn in a suit? Do you like rats, etc.? But that's possible to see what type of personality the person is, what they think. Nowadays they categorize people in types of personalities, and according to that type, they can, make sometimes premature diagnosis, or any kind of diagnosis that regards their mental health and their social health. As she was in the lab, she was held in a room with brains in them, 2 jars with brains in them, and the jars had names, and she asked who the names were. Were they the brains in the jars, or were they the people or students or professors or any researcher who is um, doing some kind of paper. Now, why do EMFs have those effects, she asks. And I myself ask the same question. Research has shown that certain type of EMFs, electromagnetic fields, can be clinically beneficial in certain conditions. That's just in general. Like EMFs exposure also affects melatonin and causes microseizures. It could be beneficial, and it can cause microseizures because it affects the production of melatonin and then cause sleep deprivation the same way stress hormones work. She also learned from the same professor that EMFs can be associated with transient altered threshold in the ability to detect normally indiscriminable stimuli that you cannot readily discriminate, differentiate, Does that mean that certain condition EMFs can actually enhance the senses to the point a person can sense paranormal presence? That was her question. Soundproof room and electrode around the head, that was how she was going to be stimulated. And of course with those computer-generated electromagnetic fields. She was sensory deprived in a soundproof room and dark chamber. Apart from fleeting faces and a siren noise she felt and heard, nothing happened. When she was out, when the experiment was done, she reported this, and they told her that her EEG revealed she was not sleeping. Whatever she heard, she actually heard was not, it's just that aura and that sensory deprivation and the electromagnetic fields could have caused that. Or just the apprehension can cause that, the anxiety, which acts in the same way, right? That's what they said. Her feeling to react was attributed to the fact that she was left hemisphere, although she has reported that that was not reaction enough. So that she felt they told her she was left hemisphere dominant, and the area that is stimulated by EMFs is the right temporal lobe. Possibly that's what was the neuroscientist's explanation. Mary Roach, however, think that her experience. Now let me go back to that. I don't know how they can make that judgment, but possibly there is research about it. The researcher explaining exactly how it happened. Now Mary Roach, however, think that her experience caught up with her 5 years later, when she started hearing knocks at her house's door. Only her and no one else can hear that. Isn't it something that happens to lots of people? Sometimes it can happen. Sometimes, like, you're sitting there and you feel like as if you heard a knock, but probably it's a delayed reaction to another stimuli that happened and you didn't get. So, Chapter 10, Listening to Casper. A psychoacoustic expert sets up a camp in England haunted spots. She took us back to England on a tour to some famous haunted mansions. She learned from the acoustic engineer, who is also a psychoacoustic researcher and university professor, that there has been many reports from the staff of the encounters or sensed presences of paranormal. The said engineer had also brushed with such encounters. He himself felt them. Nevertheless, he explained it as a consequence of exposure to some degrees in or cleaning agent. Trichoethylene, for example, is highly toxic, and that was used by the cleaning staff. And that kind of substance can be absorbed through the skin, inhalation, or ingestion. The fumes coming out of such chemical might cause hallucinations. The engineer she was interviewing has also seen objects moving. The explanation offered now was that some wave pressure, infrared ones, can cause such paranormal-like activity. Infrasound span from 0 to 20 hertz, when powerful, can cause certain seemingly paranormal activity, such as when he saw aluminum foil quiver or move. His tools detected 19 hertz infrared waves. 19 hertz is the resonant frequency of the eyeball. In other words, if standing near a field with similar infrared frequency, a person may experience nystagmus, voice resonance, and wine glass sound. Wave pressure might make the glass vibrate or even break. Now again, I've been exposed to that. For some reason, it happened to me a while ago while I was in nursing school. I thought it was just stress and lots of caffeine. I was sitting there, and then my eyes started twitching, and then I have that nystagmus-like activity in my eyeballs, and I really freaked. And then it subsided later. But again, I use lots of insecticide, because we have really mice that come from outside, and then lots of badly grounded wiring. The walls are not really that thick, and they allow for lots of activity between the walls. So peripheral vision, she said, and it's reported in the book, is extremely sensitive, which explains people saying, "I could have sworn I saw someone passing by the corner of my eye." Those sightings or presences or even real shadows detected by the peripheral vision, which also can save our lives in the presence of a real danger. So old buildings have thicker walls and empty. Sound is absorbed better, and infrared or non-infrared resonance is intensified, which explains echoes, and there are areas of focus where such effects are more intense than others. Henceforth, the feeling that there is a hum or even a shadow in a particular spot, like what I hear in the walls. The author said that infrared sounds tend to pull in a certain corner. As for feeling chilly, where a person thinks there is a presence, neuroscientists explain that the sympathetic neural transmission tend to react to the infrared frequency, and that EMFs, electromagnetic fields, catalyze the flight or fright response, blood rushing away from the extremities, surfaces to vital organs, heart racing, chills, cold skin, etc. A Dortmund University non-lethal weapon expert explains to the author that infrasounds can interact with the liquid in the inner ear and set off an illusion of motion, causing thus the reported feeling of unease by the cellar visitors of those old buildings. The same expert took 50 people to one of those cellars after a lecture in the subject, like after having primed them, as she said, about the possibility that's what they will be feeling when going to those haunted, quote, buildings, and when they will visit the cellar. Only one out of 50 people reported the expected feelings. NASA reported, according to the same source, that astronauts are exposed to massive infrasound before liftoffs without any damaging effect. NASA is also reported to have recruited volunteers and exposed them to similar infrasound, causing the vibrating eyeball effects. Didn't I say that? Where was I going? To Pluto? So, still it is believed only a few people are sensitive to infrasound waves. The military failed to industrialize it into a powerful non-lethal weapon for lack of powerful enough amplifier. It could be turned strong enough, though it still can be turned strong enough to cause certain type of malaise, such as salivation, uncontrollable defecation, bodily discomfort, chest pain sensation, etc. It's kind of to bring with mind those things we learned in toxicology, according to Jürgen Altman. Certain birds and animals can produce and hear infrasound: eagle, elephants, whales, tigers, rhinos, etc. Mary Roach's source, Vic Tandy, an authority in the field, is bewildered by the fact that only a few people can sense infrasound. Man had the ability that helped him sense predators such as tigers and avoid them, and that was long time ago, and he could sense that only by that kind of infrasound or ability that possibly we used to have but now has become extinct because of lack of use maybe. A Russian institute testing devices with non-lethal infrasound effects on humans developed a device that could affect the trajectory of a baseball-sized object with 10 decibels. Just 10 decibels of infrasound, that weapon was able to move the trajectory of a flying object or object you kick in the air, and that's the size of a baseball. As the author continued to talk about infrasound and her research in the matter, she realized she might be infrasound sensitive. She cried as she stood on a rooftop buzzed by Blue Angle's fighter plane, as she stood 2 streets away from collapsing building, and the queerness she feels in her chest during Sunday Mass that she attributed to the organ music. Now I don't know, as I feel like I'm having many things in common with this lady, because sometimes I feel like my tears come in for no reason. I'm there, and it happened to me many times when I went to the Blue Gallery for those open mic readings, and as I stand there and I see all, and I start reading, I mean, I fight strongly not to start like weeping. It feels like, and I don't know why, and I attributed that maybe because I saw those dogs in there and I have a phobia of dogs. I don't know. So to verify the truth about such realization she found about herself, she asked Vic Tandy to expose her to a 19 Hz infrasound wave. And that, as I said, is a very strong one. It's one that makes your eyeballs vibrate and can cause you lots of malaise. He did using the computer generating the infrasound with the help of other devices. She felt nothing despite the fact she was exposed to the waves many times. So see, it is something that not really tangible, that's not really verifiable. She asked Vic Tandy to do it again as they were about to wrap it up. He was like, okay, lady, I'm done. We've done it many times. You felt nothing. But then she said, okay, let's do it just one more time. She felt weird, and she told him that she felt something. He answered he had not discharged yet. So he was about to wrap it up. She asked him to do it again, and then when she thought he had done it, she said, "Oh, this time I felt something." He said, "No, I haven't discharged anything yet." Was it psychological, or loss of priming, or delayed reaction? Because after all, she has been exposed 19 to 19 hertz after 19 hertz after 19 hertz, waves. She closed chapter 10 with this quote: "Perhaps it's time for a break from the tail-chasing complexities of scientific methods. Perhaps some other learned pursuit has to offer." That's a quote from the book. The other pursuit is what she dedicated most of chapter 11 to, trying to prove Gasper in court. Now, if you remember, if you watch cartoons or watch some movies about specters that are rated below 13, then you must know who Gasper is. So, unfortunately, in chapter 11, although the court ruled in favor of Gasper, it was simply because the litigators agreed to drop the case. And that's what we're going to read. Is this case that happened in North Carolina, Chaffins versus the dead guy in the overcoat. That's the title. We are exposed to another anecdote. It's simply mostly anecdotal, about the Mocksville, North Carolina farmer whose second well was found. He had a well, and then 4 years after he died, a second will appeared. He appeared based on an apparition to his son, to one of his sons. Chafin left all his lands in his first will, all his land, to his second youngest son. The will, although was believed to be written out of fear of his daughter-in-law, still was not contested. 4 years after his death, he appeared to one of his left-off of the will sons and guided him to find in the second one that he hid in the folds of an old Bible. The will this time divided the heritage equally among the 4 offsprings, with the promise to take care of the mother should she be still alive. The will was, of course, contested by the daughter-in-law in court. However, the court went into recess. While the court went into recess, the family also went into recess and negotiated a deal, and they came back saying they want to drop the case, to the satisfaction of all the parties, the involved parties. And that is how the court decided in favor of the will, the second will, that was found based on the apparition of the ghost. The story happened at the beginning of the 20th century. Mary Roach went to North Carolina, met the grandchildren, looked legal documents, and even had an examiner to verify the authenticity of the second will by comparing it with the first. To Mary's disappointment, the expert ruled in favor of the first will, but not without casting some doubts. Chapter 12, 6 Feet Over. Notice the chapter's title says 6 feet over, not 6 feet under, an idiomatic expression that is commonly used to refer to people being buried. That is simply because she's talking in this chapter about people who are not dead and buried, but who almost got there. In other words, people who experienced near-death experience, also known NDE, because they briefly clinically died when were then brought to life. Her quest in this chapter was to actually investigate the veracity of those NDE anecdotes by contacting the only God she has always held valid and can provide her with some grounding gravitational security. Science. What do they say? What does science and the scientists say about that? Most research universities and institutes that actually dedicate efforts to evaluate research that would or could answer questions about ourselves and our world have actually researched and even labs that investigate life after life or life after death. She's about to see a patient momentarily killed in an OR at the Virginia University Hospital. The patient is to receive a defibrillator implant to verify its functionality. They have to shock the patient to VF, ventricular fibrillation, or flatline. Then the defibrillator will reset the rhythm into sinus 1. The patient dies for seconds, and that's when the NDE should happen or is expected to happen. Bruce Grayson, a psychiatrist at the university who has been researching NDEs for decades, is there with his laptop flat open and facing the ceiling. Images of animated characters in 5 colors are on. The idea is if the patient wanders out of his body and flies to the ceiling to have a peek, he most obviously would not miss the laptop facing the ceiling, and he could only see the images on the computer from above. The outcome of this particular experience is not clearly stated, but Mary Roach, however, declared she would be readily volunteering to also have a peek from over the ceiling should the experiment validate the NDE, the near-death experience. Many other theories either refute or corroborate the NDEs or dissect them in the temple of science. There is the theory that oxygen deprivation, drugs used in anesthesia, and psychedelic seizures and endorphins can induce NDEs or NDEs-like experiences, tunnel light, or light at the end of tunnel, out-of-the-body experience, etc. Cardiologists, more than psychologists or parapsychologists, weird enough, not really, are the ones who have been more involved in NDEs research. They are the ones who see patients brush with death and then bring them back to life and die. Van Lommel, a Dutch cardiologist, had led a research of NDEs, 344 cardiac arrest cases, 18% of these reported having lived an NDE experience, and that was across the span of a long period. In one from another. According to him, consciousness, perception, and memory seem to have continued to function. According to the same quoted source, the Dutch cardiologist, the brain is compared to a computer. When shut down and unplugged of the power source, it cannot work. He has not found explanation to NDE, not even to explain them as hallucinations caused or induced by drugs or anesthesia. Because even when person under anesthesia, they lose the ability to memorize, to remember. Neurosurgery has also been interested in NDEs. Epilepsy researchers at the program of neurology and neurosurgery discovered the site in the brain. It is not mentioned what area nor a name of the area, but that area or that side of the brain stimulates, when stimulated, create the experience sensation of looking on one's body from above, the out-of-body experience. That happens during epileptic episodes or seizures. The author then wondered, what if she gets records of or interviews of the blind and deaf population who have been there? Unfortunately, she was unable to get any records as far as the deaf were concerned, but she had chance to get a few anecdotes of NDEs that are tucked in the drawers of NDE's research. She interviewed specialists. In one of the cases, a blind person reported an idyllic image, colorful image she had seen. When asked to clarify whether he saw or sensed, he repeated that he saw. Another woman reported she had wandered out from her body and saw red shoes on the roof and asked the nurse to verify the next day. The latter backed her claim, but then that very anecdote was removed from the published research, and the researcher claimed the woman had lied and asked people to overlook that. Overall, most the cases that were all or most the cases were anecdotal and lacked the powerful, tangible scientific proof she was hoping for. Only a few of the surveyed people with near-death experiences who have seen hellish-like images. That was most of them are like those heavenly panorama and happiness and beauty, but only a few have reported hellish-like images. There are a few facts that support science and attribute the visual hallucination and out-of-the-body illusion to chemicals or areas of certain areas of the brain that get stimulated during epilepsy, for example, of those episodes during those episodes of transient death. The NDEs might also be an extrapolation or in hospitals and what they know about them. Like extrapolation, people bring in experience